Hey there, folks. It's Scott once again, and I am doing a movie review, but I'm doing a review that was requested by somebody. Her name is Terrell, or T, really, but she doesn't care which name I call her, just as long as it starts with the T, right? But anywho, this review is definitely for her, and just want to say thanks for recommending this, since I actually have never seen this film before. I have heard of this film, and what I'm talking about, it's Ladyhawke. Came out April 12th, 1985. The film is directed by Richard Donner and also produced by Donner himself, along with who would be his future wife, Lauren Schuler, as well. And the film was written by Edward Kamara, Michael Thomas, Tom McKenzie, and David Peoples, who's actually uncredited. And the film stars Matthew Broderick, Rutger Hauer, Michelle Pfeiffer, Leo McKern, who's sadly no longer with us anymore, and the same with John Wood, who's also no longer with us as well. And a couple other additions, like the guy that plays Marquette, Ken Hutchinson, and also Alfred Molina in one of his earlier film roles. Like before then, I recognized he was in Raiders of the Lost Ark as the guy that tried to steal the artifact away from Indy. Yeah. We always call him Indiana Jones, but I just call him Indy for short. He's the one that dropped the whip and said adios, and he gets killed himself. But anyways, overall, I liked the film. I thought it was a good film. It's not something I would watch every day, but it's definitely got some good performances, and I like the setting, and the cinematography is really good. And, sadly the film didn't do very well. The budget was $20 million for what I read, and it only made $18 million, $18.4 million specifically. But I guess it was able to find its audience on video at some point, so maybe that's why. Or it could have been that nobody was really a fan of the soundtrack. I forgot to mention this. The film score was composed by Andrew Powell, and it was arranged by Alan Parsons, if I'm not mistaken, if that's the guy's name. Produced by Alan Parsons, so yeah. And apparently I'll get to that stuff. I'll just focus on the plot and the overall plot and talk about the pros and cons like I always do, so yeah. So basically it takes place in, sorry, my nose is freaking itching. Gosh, I hate that. Okay, not using my fingers. Sorry about that. Anywho. The film itself takes place in medieval Europe because, it is a kind of medieval fantasy type of film. And it starts off with, we see Matthew Broderick's character, Philippe Gaston. He's also called the Mouse, apparently. He escapes the Bishop of Aquila, which apparently is very hard to escape, and it would be a miracle to accomplish. But somehow he's able to do that, despite the fact that his first attempt, he goes underwater, and he tries to get out, by going and try to attempt to go in the secret hideout, climb up and get inside of the church somehow. But unfortunately, someone steps on his hands. He falls back down into the water. But luckily, he's able to swim, and then he finds there's like a hole in the dungeon gate, which I guess, back then, I guess they didn't really do their maintenance and whatnot on it. So yeah, he's able to get out through there. He also, is very crafty and very sly. He steals one of the guards who are sitting on kind of like the deck of near the river or the water and whatnot, and steals these bag of coins, and actually steals the knife by cutting off what hooks the little bag of coins. And he basically, changes clothes. He actually steals some clothes, and he steals some boots, and he decides to go into an inn to kind of, celebrate his victory. And he even decides he's going to try to, tell the tale. But unfortunately, the person that was, trying to track him down, or Marquette, the Captain Marquette, who was basically looking for him earlier, who notifies people of his escape, is actually at that inn, and then he hears about it and actually tries to apprehend Gaston. I feel like when I'm saying Gaston, I think of the guy from Beauty and the Beast. But anyways, they try to apprehend him. He tries to, see if he can escape, but eventually he ends up being captured. And then, of course, when he has the knife and scratches up Marquette's face, then he orders his men to kill him. But thankfully, Captain Navarre, Rutger Hauer's character, is able to intervene and prevent that from happening. And he eventually has his duel with the Marquette's guards, and actually doesn't kill him, but defeats Marquette himself. And eventually, he's able to take Gaston on his travels, and he also has an owl, which would explain the purpose of the plot. Along the way, they actually stop at some kind of lodge, farmer's lodge, to kind of rest for the night. And then we actually see, Navarre disappear, and apparently this mysterious woman, played by Michelle Pfeiffer, comes in, and because earlier Matthew Broderick's character is trying to collect wood and start a fire, but he decides he doesn't want to do it, and he believes he's being chased by the wolf, but apparently the wolf actually attacks the farmer with the axe. I guess he was either going to kill Broderick's character or try to defend him. It's not really clear on that, but anyways, the wolf takes out the farmer with the axe, and then apparently the mysterious woman actually goes to it and accompanies it, or at least tends to it, apparently. Then she disappears, and then, of course, we see Navarre return, and he mentions that his real intention of taking Philippe Gaston was to try to break back into Aquila's from the place that he escaped, and Gaston's not willing to do that, and he actually ends up getting tied up, and then when it's later night, he encounters that mysterious woman yet again, who actually frees him and actually attempts to run away, but eventually he gets captured yet again by the bishop's guards, more than likely probably Marquette's men trying to track them both down. And eventually he's able to... Then apparently when Navarre is able to come upon Gaston, there's apparently an ambush that the guards were setting up. Both Navarre and his Hawk are both hit by the arrows, by the crossbow bolt arrows specifically. But luckily, being strong as he is, he's actually able to take out all the bishop's guards, and he then requests that Gaston take the Hawk to the castle, where he can. There would be a monk, or I think that's what he says. Apparently, a monk by the name of Imperius, who can help and save the Hawk. And apparently, he's able to take it down to that castle, and Imperius, is able to do his thing and help out the Hawk. But when night comes around, Gaston encounters that mysterious woman yet again, and comes to find out that they're both the same person. And he eventually does this because he was kicked out, and he's able to pick the lock, Gaston, to see what's going on. Since he notices the wound and whatnot, Imperius begins to explain that she is Isabeau of Anjou. She and Navarre were cursed by the bishop because Isabeau refused the bishop's love, and actually they both had a secret love for each other, the Navarre character and Isabeau, and so they were both cursed by the bishop because their secret vows were leaked by Imperius in a drunken confession, pretty much. And basically, this demonic curse turns Isabeau into a Hawk at day, and then she becomes human at night, and Navarre becomes the wolf at night, pretty much. So even when they are together, they are eternally apart, as they have been quote on saying. And eventually, Navarre is able to, come back in the morning and, retrieve her Hawk, even though the guards attempt to try to come after Gaston, and probably more than likely the Isabeau lady herself, but they both end up being dead, and the Hawk definitely returns to Navarre. And despite the fact that Imperius tries to bring the information that they can actually be human yet again, if they're able to reverse the curse, if they're able to face the bishop in their human form, but unfortunately Navarre dismisses it and thinks it's impossible for that to happen. In order to do this, they have to be on the flesh. It would be like a day without a day without night, and a night without day, pretty much. And after all that, apparently, all this is going on, the bishop, getting wary of this, he decides to send Alfred Molina's character, Caesar, who is basically a wolf trapper that serves the bishop. He tries to track him down. And during this time, whenever Isabeau's in her human form, whenever Philippe believes that this is the last time he'll see her in her human form, they have a little dance, and they're eventually encountered by this Caesar, who intends on going after the wolf and more than likely killing Isabeau herself. But eventually she is actually able to follow Caesar, despite the fact that he's laid out all these bear traps and whatnot. Eventually Isabeau is actually able to kick the Caesar into one of those bear traps after being distracted by Navarre's wolf form, and eventually dies from it. Then during this time, they try to see if they can somehow be together during this one part. It's snowing, and apparently the wolf, Navarre's wolf form, slips into this break in the ice, and Philippe has to come and save it. And during this moment, there's a moment where they do actually see each other. When I'm trying to remember this. Gosh, Navarre is slowly starting to become the human part of him again, though you can tell the eyes are still part of the wolf. And then you briefly see him trying to touch Isabeau in her human form before she reverts back to the form of the hawk. Eventually, despite all that, they decide there may be a chance, for them to revert back to their human selves and break the curse once and for all. And Philippe, and with the help of Imperius, decide to break in. He decides eventually. Imperius disguised himself as some kind of person taking Isabeau in her human form by covering her all up, and eventually Gaston swims back into the way he escaped, and then eventually ends up climbing back up to where he was originally going to escape the first time, into the church cathedral. So eventually the next day, Isabeau in her hawk form, and then Rutger Hauer's character, Navarre, in his human form, decides he's definitely going to confront the bishop once and for all. That's John Wood's character right there. And he eventually engages in a battle with Marquette, and eventually wins, even though there was supposedly maybe, if he did fail, that is if the church bells ring, that maybe if he did fail, that maybe he would have Imperius kill Isabeau in her hawk form, to spare of all the suffering and pain that she might have. But luckily that doesn't happen, even though when the sun starts to collide with the moon and whatnot, he still, of course, is human. But then Isabeau is able to walk in after Navarre is able to defeat and actually kill Marquette this time in a sword battle, which is done very well. And then apparently, even before Isabeau enters, he believes that, like you said, he thought it was too late and he was about to kill the bishop. But luckily, Isabeau shows up in her human form and actually walks up to the bishop and demands that he look at her, or look at both of them. And right when he's about to probably, I guess, throw his arrow into her, or maybe at first it looked like he was going to do it to Rutger Hauer's character, but he doesn't. Hauer's able to Navarre's able to turn around and throw his sword back into him, thus for killing them while they're both in the flesh. And luckily for that, they're still human, and apparently that breaks the curse. And they eventually thank Philippe and what's this? Gosh, Imperius. They both thank them pleasantly, and eventually they leave, and Rutger and Navarre and Navarre. Oh gosh, I keep saying Navarre and Isabeau embrace each other in a joyous stance, pretty much, and they both break free and they break the curse, and I guess they live happily ever after. But yeah, the plot's definitely simple to follow. It's well executed. I guess the main problem, or the main drawback, the cons to this, was the soundtrack, I guess. I wouldn't say it's the worst soundtrack. There are moments where it did work, where he would have the classical compositions, but then it would go into this unexpected synth that could easily be used for a modern score. I know it's the 80s and they wanted to do that. They wanted to try something different, which I can understand, but at times the score did work in some place, and sometimes it didn't work. Like in the opening theme, I guess you could say, when they used that synth style kind of score, I guess it was okay. But when they repeated it in certain fight scenes and whatnot, it seemed a little. I think in the very first one, or at least the one at the end, where Gaston's trying to escape, and then Navarre has his battle with them. Well, I can't remember for sure, but anywho, I don't hate the soundtrack, but it just felt out of place, and I think they should have tried opting for a more traditional or classic score. But I wouldn't say it's bad, because there are some moments in the score where it works, especially, which I'll get to. And what is the other con? It is a little slow. It's a little slow in the middle. I'll admit to that. Maybe they could have cut a few minutes out of it, but that wasn't a huge deal. But I'll get to the pros. All the performances are pretty good. You know, I like some of the humor that I guess Gaston is saying whenever he escapes, or the humor that's in here. Like whenever he's escaping, he thinks he sees some kind of animal in the sewer, but it's just really I guess it's this exoskeleton of a cow, I guess, or buffalo or whatever. And then of course, when Gaston thinks he's like dreaming while he's sleeping and whatnot after seeing the girl, and of course the girl says, "You are dreaming," which I thought was funny. And then there's a moment whenever he's stealing the clothes and whatnot, and then apparently when he's about to steal the boots, he tells the kids, "Hey kids, look up there!" And he just like snatches the boots, and of course they still see him regardless. Thought there were some nice little moments of levity and humor and whatnot. It's typical of Donner's films. I mean, there is humor, but it doesn't go overboard and whatnot. So it has a good moment of levity, and I like how Broderick's character kind of uses humor to kind of calm himself, especially after he scratches up Marquette's face. He's like, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry," and whatnot. So yeah, or he's basically talking to himself just to calm himself in the situation. And then there's Rutger Hauer's character for the action scenes that he's in, like he's able to take out Marquette's guards and whatnot, and actually use the crossbow and whatnot. He does a fine job. He's actually good in the role. Apparently, believe it or not, from what I've read, Kurt Russell was supposed to be in this film. He was actually cast at one point, but I think he left during rehearsals, and that's when they brought in Rutger Hauer's character, or not character. They brought in Rutger Hauer to replace him. And Michelle Pfeiffer, she's very effective. Is definitely one of her earlier film roles. I don't know if it was her film debut, but she did find the role. She's very soothing, calm, and likable, and all the characters. You definitely feel sorry for the main characters of Navarre and Isabeau, especially since they don't deserve to be cursed, especially since the bishop's a pretty maddened and despicable bastard, especially when someone rejects you and you decide to put a fucking curse on them. It's uncalled for. So he does his role very well, even though you don't see too much of him. You see him in moments here and there. Then you definitely see him towards the end when he's confronted by Navarre and Isabeau in that scene. And Leo McKern, the guy that plays Imperius, the monk that helps him, he does fine. I'm not really familiar with that actor. I know from what I read, he appeared in the Blue Lagoon, the original one. So yeah, and he does fine. Apparently, he was actually in the first two Damien films, The Omen and the second one. So yeah, and I like the cinematography. The cinematography in this film was good. I really like how it really showed the locations. I'm curious to where it was filmed, and I think I might be able to see on IMDb if it doesn't take too long. So we'll see. Let's see, filming locations. It's actually filmed in Italy and Toscana, Massacra, Seymour. Let's see where they are at specifically. So a good majority was filmed in Italy, so it definitely used its location settings to its advantage. Like I said, the cinematography was great. Like you see certain mountain structures, and it looked very beautiful. And they definitely used its budget to its effect. So cinematography is good, performances are good, and at least there's no downbeat ending. At least they get their happiness. They break the curse. Navarre is able to avenge someone that actually admired Navarre in the beginning, and the Marquette guy pushes him into a sword and kills him, and he's at least able to kill that Marquette guy, the Captain Marquette specifically. And and the costume design was pretty effective. So yeah, I definitely didn't have any problems with this film, other than the score seemed out of place, and it felt like in the middle the pacing was a little off. But other than that, I really liked this film. It was a good film. I just think it deserves a better DVD and Blu-ray, because the DVD and Blu-ray are pretty high priced. I actually rented this on YouTube because it was cheaper. It only cost me like $4.32. So yeah, I'm a tight ass sometimes. So yeah, everyone is. But anywho, yeah, I really don't have anything really bad to say. I mean, even though the score is kind of a con, I don't hate the score. It just at times was out of place and should have gone with a more traditional score. But some of the moments, like I was going to get to the example of when it worked. When there's this awesome little transformation scene whenever they're laying in the snow, and Navarro's still in his wolf form, but then he slowly starts to transform back into his human form, but not complete. And there's this moment where Isabeau sees that. They're both kind of trying to touch each other, and the sun's kind of reflecting off their hand. It's a very effective sequence. I think it holds up pretty well, considering that this was 1985 that it came out, and shows like the bond and the loneliness and aching to touch each other. These are characters that are definitely, wanting to spend eternity with each other. So yeah, I think it's a very effective sequence. And yeah, I would recommend this film. If you don't want to pay $18 to $20 for the Blu-ray, I'd suggest giving it a rent on YouTube first, and then make your own judgments then. But I like the film. It was a good film, and I would definitely recommend it if you're a big fan of like medieval fantasy type movies. Like you had several of them in the 80s. Like you had this one, you had Excalibur. I'm trying to think of something similar. You had Legend, Dragon Slayer, which I don't know if anyone's even familiar with, and of course Willow, which I really enjoy. I had that film on DVD. But yeah, Ladyhawke, it's a good film. Definitely would recommend it, and thumbs up. And thank you thanks you T for suggesting this. I definitely like the film.